Lucy Walker is an Emmy-winning, twice Oscar-nominated director, renowned for creating riveting, character-driven nonfiction. Her films have won over 100 awards, including 2 at Sundance and 2 at Berlin, and include Mountain Queen, the summits of Lakpa Sherpa, of Night and Light, the story of Ibogaine, Bring Your Own Brigade, The Lion's Mouth opens, The Crash Reel, The Tsunami and the Cherry Blossom, Wasteland, Countdown to Zero, Blindsight, and Devil's Playground. For Netflix, she directed and executive produced How to Change Your Mind, executive produced Ram Dass, Going Home, and produced Why Did You Kill Me? She was born in London and graduated from Oxford University before winning a Fulbright scholarship to attend NYU's graduate film program, where she supported herself with a successful career as a DJ. Lucy Walker, welcome to the Brain Forest Cafe.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you. I can't tell you how excited I've been about this, and particularly after I've looked at some of your work. A small fraction. You've been incredibly prolific, and that says something, because and the films that you have made are very eclectic. They cover a whole spectrum, and that's very interesting. You cannot be slotted into any category other than that you had said. You mentioned in our pre-conversation that it's observational documentaries. I guess that's a way to characterize it. And I think the film The Mountain Queen is a good example of that. I can't tell you how blown away I am by that film. I have watched it 3 times, and every time it doesn't get boring. It's just so beautiful, and so this person, Lakpa, is so inspiring, and I like this documentary so much because it's not just about a woman climbing a mountain, that would be interesting enough. But it's about a woman climbing a mountain and fulfilling her dreams to be a mountain climber and living life at the same time, a difficult life. This partner of hers who turned out to be, kind of a sociopath and not a good alliance, and then her 2 kids who are just shiny and sunny. What wonderful names. And they're just great too, and it's just, it moved my heart in so many ways. And is that your latest work? Is that the latest release?
Yeah, that just came out on Netflix, and it's been incredible to be sharing that with people. And it's about this incredible woman, Lakpa, as you mentioned, and her wonderful 2 teenage daughters as well, a big part of the story. And they've been really flourishing, since we made the movie, and they've kind of been through this really period of struggle. And so the film kind of catches Lakpa sort of setting off on this mission to re-inspire her family. She devoted her whole life to inspiring women and girls and showing the world what women and girls were capable of. But at the beginning of the movie, her own daughters are barely speaking to her, and she's really having a tough time, and she's washing dishes in Whole Foods in Connecticut. And it seems a little harebrained that this middle-aged sort of woman could just go summit Mount Everest. But that's what she decides she needs to do. And we follow her off on this odyssey. And through this whole journey, I don't want to give too much away because I hope people will track it down on Netflix. But it's been just this beautiful privilege of watching her story unfold, and then also, continuing now through sharing the movie, where the family kind of continues to kind of flourish. And I love making these films about people that inspire me. I think life is tough, and And I like these people that kind of light up the screen and you've never seen before. And she's like, carrying the dirty dishes at the back of a Whole Foods in Connecticut. Like, a lot of just wouldn't give her a second look, really. And yet I love the fact that she is, just another example of how awesome humans are, and how if we open our eyes, there's just so much magnificence in the world and in our fellow creatures that sometimes in our hustle, we kind of are a bit blinded to. And I just love I just love the fact that now people see her, and she's also hilarious and just has had this absolutely unique life. Grew up as a Sherpa in Nepal, not allowed to go to school. She had cut off her hair, pretended to be a boy to escape an arranged marriage. I mean, she is an epic, and now the world gets a chance to see her, and that is, just incredible. So thank you.
I mean, and you have the privilege, really, the opportunity to really bring her story to the world. And I think her story is so inspiring, not just for women, but just for anyone who faces adversity and who will not be stopped. They have their aspiration, their goal, and nothing will stop them. And I'm so happy to hear you say that her family life has improved since the film came out. I think the recognition that she's getting, will hopefully her daughters are proud of her, and it appeared at the end of the film that they really did get it. I am no film critic, Lucy, but to me, this is Oscar-worthy stuff, and I hope that you'll get a nomination for it.
Tell him.
Well, tell him. I'll tell the world in this podcast, but my word means nothing. But I would certainly, if there's anybody that would listen, we need lots more of this stuff. This kind of work is just amazing, and it's it's just the latest stage in a pretty impressive track record. Your work has been so eclectic and yet so interesting. I haven't obviously reviewed all your films, but I did look at trailers and so on from some of them. The Mountain Queen was not the first mountain climbing film that you made. It was Blindsight, which was much earlier, which was
20 years ago, my first Everest movie. That's right. And that's how I first heard about Lakpa. I was actually on Everest in 2004. I spent 6 months in Tibet in 2004 making a film about blind people climbing Everest. And that time we climbed from the Tibet side. For Mountain Queen, we climbed from the Nepal side, which is Lakpa's home country's Nepal. But in 2004, I had this incredible life experience of spending all this time in Tibet. And as you may know, Tibet has also changed so much in 20 years. And I think that's the sort of privilege of my career, is that I've had just this unbelievable fortune to really be in different places in the world, and not just sort of as a tourist, but really getting to know people and sort of bringing my craft of filmmaking and trying to make the best film I can that conveys, often incredible people in a really fascinating place, going through quite a riveting, story of some kind. That seems to be a bit of a formula for me that has yielded these films that people actually want to watch, which is not always, easy when you're making documentaries.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But the idea of blind people summiting Everest, I mean, that's an oxymoron if there ever was one, and that's just...
I learned so much I learned so much. And like you, perhaps I had this first impression, like, wait, aren't you climbing for the views? Because it feels terrible. So if you're blind, why would you climb? And actually, I really turned around on that, and I learned so much from these blind people. I learned Eric Weinmeier, who's the first blind man to summit Mount Everest. In fact, I think still the only one. He was really doing it to show the world what blind people were capable of. And I kind of, I think there's different reasons to climb Mount Everest, but I think that's a good one. You know, I don't necessarily agree with all the tourists tromping up there, you know what I mean? But Lakpa's really, you know, she's a Tibetan Buddhist, and this is her god, mountain goddess of the universe, you know, and she has a very special relationship with the mountain, and she's also showing the world what women are capable of. And she grew up in Nepal, and she was the first Nepali woman to summit Mount Everest, and she really needed to show Nepali people what women were capable of, because there was so much gender inequality in that culture in particular. So she's got a good reason to climb, and so did Eric. And in fact, when he climbed Everest, there was a blind school in Tibet, the first and only blind school in Tibet. And actually, Tibet has more blind people than anywhere in the whole world, actually, because for various reasons. And when he climbed, the blind school kids and the founder of the school was so grateful to him, because they really showed people in Tibet that blind people were not useless. And it really got people in Tibet's attention. And they were so grateful, they wrote to him and said, wow, you know, thank you. Life is really, really tough for blind people in Tibet, actually, because he's an American. And he thought, wow, if I'm a privileged Western dude, what if I went back and we climbed together and we showed them that it's not just the, you know, resourced white guy that can climb. Actually, all blind people are really, really capable. And so he goes back, and we film this expedition where the blind German founder of the school, the blind American mountain climber, and 6 blind Tibetan teenagers all climb up a peak of Everest called Lakpa. It's actually kind of next to Everest, a mountain called Lakpa, or a peak of Everest called Lakpa, coincidentally, because Lakpa is the name of the woman the later Everest film was about. And then we set off on this expedition. And what's interesting about that film, actually, the expedition goes a bit wrong, and it all kind of goes pear-shaped, and it gets quite interesting. It's not as simple as like a bunch of people stand on top of the mountain happily. It actually got quite nuanced. And anyway, so that was an amazing story as well. But these people are truly like heroes to me, you know, and that's partly why I think why the films look so eclectic. It's because I think they're all about either subjects or people that I think are really, really important, that I'm really, really interested enough to sort of drop everything and work really, really hard. And I don't think anyone's made a film that's really, you know, I don't think they've been widely recognized enough yet, you know. So I think it's really exciting to tell that story, because the audience just doesn't know it yet. And then you can bring all your film, you know, tricks to make it as, you know, well made and engrossing as possible.
When you were doing this film with Lakpa,
yeah,
or the Blindsight, were you actually up on the mountain filming? Did you have to summit Everest to do
it? The top. I went all the way the first time. The second time, this time, I take full responsibility for hiring and supervising the team that did, but I didn't even try. And here's why. I think that you know, films are incredibly collaborative, and the great thing about it is that, you know, everyone plays their part on the team, a little bit like mountain climbing. What's really fun about Mountain Queen, apart from everything, is that unlike, I think, almost every other mountain movie, all the people on screen are Sherpa. So Lakpa's a Sherpa. Her family she climbs with are all Sherpas. You know, you might call them climbing Sherpas, because Sherpa is kind of a job, it's a last name, and it's a clan. Everyone who's a Sherpa is called last name Sherpa, and their first name is just the day of the week that they're born. So it's like Lakpa means Wednesday, so it's like Wednesday Sherpa, you know. And her relative, you know, so it's you know, the Sherpa, the guides she was climbing with, who were also her relatives, also called Sherpa. The Sherpa, and also the job title is Sherpa. Anyway, so we gave them all good cameras and really trained them and worked with them. Like, what do you see? Here's what we like. Here's what works for our kind of style of filmmaking. But really encouraged and empowered them to kind of use their own eyes and sense of story. And if they knew what we were doing, and wouldn't it be wonderful to see what they see for a change? Because centering Sherpa people and their point of view was super exciting. And then we had one high altitude cinematographer who's an amazing altitude cinematographer called Matt Irving. And they all went off and we kind of worked together to really understand what we needed in advance, because, even when you're on the mountain, you can't necessarily like you kind of, when you're climbing, you get strung out across the place.
Right.
So even if you are up there, you're not necessarily like standing there with a really good idea, like next to the person with the camera at the time. You're more likely to be like throwing up in frame and crying to be rescued, especially if Lakpa, because she climbs very fast. And on the south side of Everest, you go through this very dangerous patch called the Icefall, and you really don't want to be a slow boat around there. It can be really endangering people. And Lakpa likes to climb fast. So I just knew that was going to be a teamwork situation. And my job was to sort of put the whole story together and put the whole team together, but I did not need to actually be physically there.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, you're an executive producer. And working with these people with the camera, so you teach them those skills. They're Sherpas, right? So then they...
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. Yeah, because they're going to be, they're going to be...
Of Matt Irving. He was...
Yeah, exactly. But I kind of feel like the future is, more Sherpa stars and more Sherpa camera cinematographers as well, right? And, Sherpa people don't just want to be Sherpa jobs, right? And so I kind of think this whole sort of re-centering Sherpa people on their own mountain, I think was part of the joy of it. And some of the shots, like there's a shot of a Sherpa smoking outside the tent, at like 21,000 feet. It's just funny, and it's a great shot, and it's the stuff like that we don't normally see. So it's really cool.
I love another thing I loved about the film, and maybe this is how you normally do it, but it was entirely in Lakpa's. She was the narrator. There was nobody interviewing her. That was also amazing, and she was insecure about her command of English, but it was good enough that it was actually quite charming, because you could understand her. You could understand what she was saying, and I loved that she just narrated the whole thing. So,
you notice that she uses a lot of nature and animal. She grew up without TV. She says like nature was her animal channel. She grew up without knowing that there were white people. The first white people that came into the village, everyone ran away. Her mother even broke her arm running away because they thought that they were yetis.
They were yetis.
Yeah, it's one of these strange creatures we haven't seen before.
They as well have been.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. So she grew up in this very remote area with this a stunning part of the world in these incredible, like very green and lush, but very high altitude. And all these like incredible creatures and in nature. And she's not literate. She never went to school, and she still doesn't read or write. So when she learned English, she learned it in her very own way. And she's so smart. But not having had a conventional English teacher or a conventional English book, she winds up really describing things. She'll say, "Oh, I'm a dirty raccoon," my dad, said that if an animal attacks, I'll fight back. So, she kind of just, I don't know. I just love how she's such a nature girl that she speaks always using kind of animals, because that's how she still has that frame from her, growing up in her valley. And I don't know, I love the way she describes things, which is just really fresh. Yeah.
Amazing. The way we met was through our mutual interest in psychedelics, and
Yep.
You've made several films either directly related to that. Michael Pollan's series, which you're the executive director. Your movie.
Director and executive producer. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, were you the executive director on that?
Director as well as executive producer.
Executive producer.
Yeah, directed it, but I also, there's kind of like slightly two different roles. But yeah, and we had an amazing team on that. But that was, I did a great deal of that. Yeah.
It was, yeah, and it was a wonderful series. I thought it was very educational. It was a series for people that maybe are curious about this whole area, maybe not experienced personally, and I thought it was very well done. And the Ibogaine movie, which I'd seen when we were at the retreat, and I did not rewatch the whole thing, but I watched significant sections of it yesterday just to refresh my memory. That's another masterpiece, Lucy. I feel that.
Not out yet. Thank you, but it's that one's not out yet. But I love that film. But keep going. Yeah.
Well, I just thought that most people, it's like Ibogaine. Whoever heard of Ibogaine? Even the cognoscenti, it's uh, not the most well known psychedelic. But I thought that as an educational documentary, it had the human interest, it had the science. I thought it was just a perfect way to educate perhaps the unpersuaded who might be FDA officials or people like that. If they can watch this film, then they can really place it into context. And of course, much of it is Howard Lotsof's and story, uh, and he was definitely a pioneer for sure. But then at the first of the movie and at the last of the movie, you bring on this Stanford neuroscientist. His name is
Nolan Williams. Yeah, Nolan Williams.
Nolan Williams, who is the next generation. I mean, to Lotsof was just some hippie who took Ibogaine, and it turned out he didn't want to take heroin anymore. But then this guy is got all the qualifications, all the credentials, and he really makes it clear that he thinks Ibogaine is a unique substance. I mean, it is a general brain reset regulator. It's, so in some sense, it goes far beyond the so-called conventional psychedelics like psilocybin, which, not to degrade psilocybin, but it's clear that Ibogaine, could be a revolution for things like as diverse as Parkinson's and traumatic brain injury. Addiction is only a part of this. It basically reconstructs the damaged brain, I guess is one way to put it. It establishes those pathways and those connections, which is something that we know that psychedelics do, but it seems to. So again, where will this be released? Where can people watch it?
We are working on it. We just we're just finishing it up now. We kind of sort of almost finished it last year and did a sneak peek at the MAPS conference in Denver, and also at Tribeca Festival, which was fantastic. And those were wonderful because also Norma Lotsof is still with us, and she's incredible. And we really wanted her to be celebrated. And so that was wonderful. But actually we hadn't quite finished it. And then Mountain Queen kind of kept me busy. And we don't have that big of a team and stuff. So now we're just finishing it, and we'll get it out in 2025 now. And I'm really thrilled about it. The goal with making it was that when I first heard about Ibogaine, I didn't know whether to believe it, because it sounds like snake oil. You take this mysterious substance from West Africa, and it can interrupt opiate addiction, which sounds like that can't be right, or we would have heard of it.
Snake oil, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then and then you look it up, and it's got these terrible risks. It is a little bit more risky than the classical psychedelics, and there have been fatalities. And at this point, you're thinking like, well, not only does it like sound like quackery, but it also sounds like downright fatal.
Mm-hmm.
What's the upside? I mean, steer clear. And as you know better than anyone, it's been tough enough for these scientists to like heroically try to get hold of these miraculous molecules for really legitimate science and all the promise that they hold since Nixon clamped down in around 70. And let alone Ibogaine, you know? And so I wanted to make something that actually kind of looked at, like, why would you? Like, what is the what is the potential here? Like, why is anyone even trying to get this through? And this incredible story I learned about, which was Howard, who had this first trip in 1962 in New York and noticed that his heroin addiction had vanished. And not only that, he'd sort of had a 180. And when he used to think of heroin as something that, like, was soothing and what he needed, instead he suddenly saw it as death, and he really was aversive to it, and he wanted to choose all the life and healthy and positive and loving things. And he was so struck by this that he sort of devoted his whole life, and along with his incredible wife Norma, to trying to get legitimate scientists to pay attention, and the government to pay attention. He just knew this was an important discovery for humanity. And he was the most tenacious. I think of him as a modern saint, honestly. And when I had this incredible privilege of just putting the whole story together and finding all the old clips, which is incredible, like an archaeological dig. And even in psychedelics world, people haven't heard of them. You know, Howard and Norma Lotsof are not very well celebrated. It's a story that's not familiar to people. And I was just stunned when I sort of had this, like, editing room and, like, you know, finding all these different clips from different places, putting it together and looking at the journey of his life and realizing that all this kind of lineage of clinics that were, everything kind of can be traced back to that one night, one trip in 1962. And now, of course, this dream is kind of coming true that Nolan Williams' lab at Stanford just got $20 million from Sergey Brin, and there's also incredible research going on in Spain and Catalonia, in the UK, in Brazil. I mean, really robust trials. And I think we're going to really start to understand, like, this molecule. And Gul Dolan, who I think is just a spectacular, researcher in the psychedelic world, calls Ibogaine the rock star of the group of psychedelics, because it seems to be the most potent and have the most potential for healing of perhaps all of them, albeit that it is a different risk profile, and that we do need to figure out how to administer it safely. And it's always about trying to caution people that it's not one to experiment with on your own.
This is not and never will be a recreational drug. I mean, this is serious. There are dangers. All medicines have side effects. All medicines, but you know, these are easily compensated in the hands of the right kinds of clinicians. It's not that dangerous, you know, in the proper context and so on. But I think so it's, you know, it's wonderful that finally the funding is coming. People are looking at it seriously. What's unfortunate is that all of this could have been investigated 20 years ago or even 30 years ago. You know, the FDA was very dismissive of it. Deborah Mash did what she could, but she got approval to use it, but she couldn't get funding. So it's a good example of the sort of 2 steps forward, 2 steps, you know, 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward kind of way that these drugs develop, especially if they don't come out of the usual pharma company clinical drug development channels. I mean, this was a lot like LSD in a certain way. A mysterious medicine that came from a plant that had all these properties, all this history, all of that. And then finally, the properties of it are beginning to be recognized, and never would have been if it hadn't been for Howard Lotsof, or wouldn't have been in the same way. I mean, he was astute enough to realize that the effect that it had, I mean, he didn't just dismiss it. He said, this is remarkable. I'm like a serious heroin addict. I don't have any craving. What the hell?
Yeah.
It's big news, you know? And so then he discovered his life's quest, and you know, and his wife has continued. It's a pity that Howard didn't live long enough to see all this begin to come to fruition. But, you know, he was definitely a pioneer, and it's just a remarkable
Isn't that a great story? No, I'm so
remarkable movie. It's kind of setting the tone for the future of neuroscience in some ways.
yeah, I can't wait to share it with the world because I'm just in love with the whole story, and it's so amazing. How often does a sort of citizen scientist, especially like a 19-year-old junkie, in the hippie or in New York, how often does does this person actually have what now this Columbia professor is saying the most important molecule he's ever seen, what Nolan at Stanford is saying it's the most powerful medicine for the brain / mind that he's that has ever been seen, and all this potential I think is there, and I felt like making the film because I began it several years ago, and during the course of it, it's expanded from being really used by people struggling with substance use disorders to Navy SEALs who are suffering from substance use disorders, but also PTSD and stuff, reporting that their PTSD was done. And another very astute observer was a doctor called Martin Palanco, and he noticed that this was happening, and he started to theorize that actually it was doing more than just curing addiction. Right. And all these elite soldiers and people suffering from different conditions have been now experiencing it. And it turns out this interruption of opiate use disorder was actually just kind of like the beginning of its miraculous properties.
Almost a side effect in a certain.
Yeah, it's sort of like the little flag that showed us that something completely like that you couldn't do with a placebo was get out of a heroin addiction without cold turkey symptoms, right? That's just unheard of. But actually, that's sort of the beginning of where it might get interesting in terms of what's in terms of stroke and all kinds of brain and psychological things. And I'm so, I don't know, it feels like I have filmed the kind of discovery of antibiotics. It's just as I've been observing in the last few years, and more people have sort of cottoned on. But what's also lovely is that the work of those early pioneers, I mean, you mentioned Deborah Mash, for example, and Howard, who died in 2010, really believing that he had failed. He had failed in his life's mission of getting people to pay attention because they'd been shut down. But actually, the clinics that they started to do the research projects, when the government funding was shut down, the addicts that he treated set up their own clinics in different places where it wasn't legal. And the people they treated, it was kind of like a sort of like a family tree. You could trace it all the way back. But those clinics are now providing data back to scientists, and really, and that's where it kind of then again came back to the notice of incredible researchers, and so I think it's just a beautiful story of actually, even when you think that your work isn't going anywhere and it looks like it's all in vain, actually the kind of roots might go underground, a little bit like the iboga shrub, perhaps. The roots may go underground for a while, but actually they are, there's a great Pablo Neruda little poem that says you can cut down all the flowers, but you can't hold back the spring. And I feel like that about this.
That's a necessary, or in the case of Ibogaine, that's a necessary thing. It had to go underground because the FDA was not receptive. But the people who were close to it understood the value, continued to work with it, and now it's reemerged, and it's reemerged in a context that is very much more appropriate because it does need to have a good clinical context. A lot of these Ibogaine treatment centers in Mexico and other places, most of them are run by good people with good intentions. Not all of them, and that's something that plagues all of these psychedelic research centers. Not everyone is a saint who's involved in this, but this again is another inspiring story. And I think that once Ibogaine is available to people for therapy and is more established and accepted, your film is going to stand out as one of the landmarks, one of the events that really made this accessible to people, and educated the public. And Not just flattering you, I really mean this.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for like stating my mission and giving me hope that it's not in vain my own work, because that is my goal. And I feel that's also why I really wanted to make How to Change Your Mind, because I've had this incredible fortune to have discovered psychedelic experience in my, as a teenager, and have been really just astounded by the benefit. Even when I was a teenager, and even though I didn't suffer from depression, as a 16-year-old, when I tried mushrooms, I said, wow, this is nature's antidepressant. I was 16 years old. This was before the literature on all that stuff.
Right.
I just noticed how it lifted and freshened me up, and just lifted me up and had me giggling and vibrant and sort of like my best self. And I thought, wow, that is not what I expected. And I felt so lucky about that. And I felt in my lifetime that story it was really important to me that that people saw that, because the potential to help people, I think, is so enormous. And as someone who's dedicated my whole life to like learning how you really apply all the craft to try to make these stories really, watchable and interesting and powerful and clear. And I thought, what stories that are more important than that could I be telling? And I really passionately believe, and it's not an accident that I wound up directing, How to Change Your Mind, and also this. I wanted to do them because I felt absolutely dedicated to those stories, being communicated to the public in the most informative, accurate, but also inspiring way, because it is, as you know, it's taken some absolutely heroic efforts to overcome, this prohibition, this sort of era that we're in with these medicines.
Right.
And and to really overcome all that fear and prejudice, and tell these stories and discover that like there's amazing stories that we don't know, and that are so important, and
They need to be told. That's the thing. They need to be told. And you do that. Speaking of another kind of psychedelic related work that you've done, and maybe you've done more, but I think the short film about Ram Dass was also, when I first watched it, I didn't know you were the producer, but it was a really moving film. A lot of us knew Ram Dass, Richard Alpert or whatever, considered him a friend, and he was, a figure in the psychedelic world, an example of basically what psychedelics can do to help you become a better person. He was widely admired. So what was your role in that? Were you the executive producer?
I did not direct that one. And I never executive produce. Executive produce means you're not sort of the parent, you're like the godparent or something, right? And something like that. You're making it happen, but you're not the kind of direct creative soul person kind of thing. And I've never taken executive producer credit on anything, and I wouldn't have taken it on that one, except for that afterwards the director said, basically forced me. And I look back and I thought, actually I did do it. And so I took it. But normally, a lot of people ask me to executive produce things I don't direct. And I'm always like, I'm too busy with my own things. I don't have the bandwidth to do a good job for anything else. I just so consumed by my own projects. But in this case, I could not help it, because I met this wonderful, I was actually teaching at Esalen. I was showing my films at Esalen, and there was a lovely sort of non-filmmaker, middle-aged guy who happened to have filmed an interview with Ram Dass and was asking me what to do with it. And I thought, wait, you have an interview with Ram Dass and yet you don't know what to do with it yet? I just wanted to do anything I could to help, because he seemed so fabulous. And I'm, such a, I just think, as you say, Richard Alpert, Ram Dass, between the psychedelics and the spiritual sort of journey, I feel like those are my sort of twin, tracks that my whole life has sort of run on, and the lights that I look to are the kind of, American Buddhists and the psychedelic pioneers, like you and your brother. And so it's just this whole sort of like, and Ram Dass is sort of like, just a legend in my life. And so I just wanted to help the director. And he already had his gorgeous creative plan, but he didn't know anyone in the industry. So I was able to just sort of help him that, and then I help him sell it to Netflix, and just sort of just be a support, an advisor, and then connect him with the industry so that it could come to Netflix and thence to the world. And it was just my enormous privilege. And I got to swim with Ram Dass in Maui, and got to attend. And it was just sort of the most exquisite, privilege. Again, like sometimes in my job, I just pinch myself and think, like, how is this another day at the office? I'm swimming and singing with Ram Dass in the, as he used to go for a weekly swim, even after his stroke. His team would wheel him down and take him for a swim in the beautiful Maui waters. And you just think, gosh, this is a dream. And I just felt like I even met my guru. I never felt like I had a guru or was looking for a guru or would be a kind of person who had a guru, but I met Ram Dass. I'm like, oh no, this is my guru, and what a sparkle of a spirit he was, right?
Yeah, he was a beautiful spirit, and it really brings it out in the fact that he had so many people who were willing to support him during his stroke, and who didn't view it as a burden, but a blessing. So he was very lucky in that way. And a lot of it is because of who he is, not only his fame, but just his actual personality, his personality as a person. People love him, basically. He is beloved. I think that's the term, So do you have any other psychedelic related films that you're hiding? Those are kind of the three, right? The Michael Pollan, the Ibogaine film, and the Rob.
I'm developing, which I don't normally talk about, but you're very special. Something I'm really interested in is interspecies communication, and whether
that, which film?
I haven't made it yet.
You haven't made it yet. Oh,
I've got other things up my sleeve. I mean, I think in terms of looking back, are any others of them psychedelic? No, not really. I mean,
really?
I think I'm always trying to sort of ask, like, what's life about, how to live it, whether it's a film about Amish teenagers or my film about like an artist working in a garbage dump in Brazil with people that pick through the garbage for a living. Or
that also is an incredible piece of work. I mean, you cover such a spectrum of things, and you seem to have a knack for just finding these, quirky stories, basically, that interesting people doing interesting things, like the film about the Well, what was it called? I'm looking at the
Wasteland, about the garbage.
Yeah, Wasteland. I mean, what an incredible film that was.
Yeah. I know it. And I have to something about a snowboarder with a brain injury, which sounds terrible, but is absolutely spectacular because of the people in it. I had a film about cherry blossoms in Japan.
Share the screen for a minute and give one idea of the spectrum of work that you've done. I'm not supposed to just this is Lucy's webpage. They're all. And you had something to do with the Buena Vista Social Club, which got a lot of attention when it came out. And this is just, an incredible collection of work, and I won't.
I love it. I feel, as you must, just a great sense of purpose about my work, and a great joy in sort of yes, I'm sort of an artist in a way because I'm doing this very creative thing, which is really, really like just, I can't stop like kind of trying to make it better, So it's a very like a flow activity, creative activity. But at the same time, I hope that I feel really good about the stories I'm putting into the world, or what's magical is when you allow an audience to see somebody or something that they didn't know about. My job is to sort of open up this window that they can really meet this other person that they wouldn't meet in regular life, or even like Lakpa, if they did meet her in real life, they may not know. In fact, they certainly wouldn't know that she holds the record for most Everest summits and that she is.
Right. You wouldn't normally think that that's a person working back in the back of Whole Foods, So this is really what I like about your work. I mean, you are a storyteller by nature. That's what film is. But you find these interesting people and situations, and then you tell their story, or you let them tell your story. This is something I really admire about your approach. It's not about Lucy Walker interviewing someone. It's about Lucy Walker creating a space where people can tell their own stories.
Exactly.
And that's what comes out very much in The Mountain Queen, and I assume, and many of the others. Occasionally, there's a narrative element, like some in the Ibogaine movie. By the way, I should mention, well, you're aware of it, but you were kind enough to share a link to the entire movie to us. I assure you we will not put that on the podcast site, because we don't want to preempt.
But soon we're going to be...
Soon. When it's ready, we'll put it up.
Just as soon as we can, we'll make sure.
There is no trailer, there's no teaser for that movie. So but we won't post that, but we'll certainly put other things on there, links to some of these other, of the whole. So, Lucy, you've been doing this for 20 years or more?
It's 30 now. I think it's
30 years.
Maybe. I mean,
I'm old enough to be doing it for 30.
I went to school really young, and basically haven't done anything else apart from directing. And my first film came out in 2002, but I'd actually worked for quite some time sort of on that before, and sort of building my craft up before. So it's been a while, but it's I feel like I've just got started, and there's so many stories. I mean, within psychedelics world, and ethnobotanical world. I mean, my gosh, where's the Schultes movie, right? Where's the Dennis movie? All the work that you're doing. I mean, there's some storytelling. I mean, all your incredible work that you're doing. I mean, where to begin, right? Coca. I mean, this is an incredible other story. I mean, all your what would you shine a light on if you had the spotlight? I mean, there are so many things, right? I find it so just so relevant and so fascinating and so beautiful. And don't you think? I mean, when you look at your world, like, don't you see all the stories?
I see stories. I don't think, I mean, people have approached us, my brother and myself, about making a movie about true hallucinations and the experiment at La Chirera and all that stuff. And that's probably not going to happen, and I'm fine with that. I don't really want to make a movie about my psychosis when I was a 20-year-old, going to the Amazon without a clue. But you mentioned a minute ago a Schultes movie. A Schultes movie could be a fantastic movie. And you should think about that. In fact, Wade Davis, has written the definitive book on Schultes, which is One River.
I'm like the biggest fan. Oh my gosh. No, absolutely.
I mean, it is a classic. You could make a movie about this if you're interested. I think that would be a great thing,
I agree.
put that in your back pocket. Let's talk to Wade and make it happen. And I don't know how these things come together. The you know the business much more than I do. We made this little 30-minute documentary called Bionosis about trying to restore this herbarium and the ketos and all that. And we made it, and we were hoping, well, get it on Netflix. I don't know. Going from making the film to actually getting it to the world is tricky. I don't know how to do it. You've done this many times, so you know how to not only make the material, but get it to the world. And
every time I do it, by the way, I look back and I think, how did I thread that needle? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, even with Mountain Queen, I look back and I think, how did I pull that off? It's never a given. It's really hard to find distribution. And there's some great films like yours that aren't available on one of these big platforms. And I sort of it is a time in documentary where actually the distribution isn't serving all these films, so I think that we're kind of in a little bit of a transition moment, and beautiful films like yours are stuck in that sort of pass in a way, and unable to quite reach the audience that they really richly deserve. But no, it is a real miracle when they do get out. But I do I think with the psychedelics, and I think about like Michael Pollan's book, and your books, and you and your brother's work. I mean, just the ways in which your work has put these stories into the world, and even though even when there are so much resistance in the world, the way you tell them, and Michael Pollan and everyone, the way these stories are told by you, it becomes irrefutable, and they become like, just, and as a young person, I was growing up in London, these were the things I read and thought, this is the most interesting and important thing. I mean, even as a young person, I thought this is just the most, compelling thing. And I think even in the state the world's in now, and the new moment, it doesn't seem any, our connection with nature and these incredible, plants and medicines and people around us, and the indigenous knowledge keepers, and all the spiritual, leaders. I mean, these are the people I think that have this potential that I see to really lead us through these times. And
yes.
right, that hasn't changed in my lifetime. If anything, the need is only more clear, right?
Yeah, I'm very much on the same page with you that when I was younger, when I was your age, when you were a teenager, I was probably about the same age, maybe a little bit younger, but or older, whatever. But when I discovered psychedelics, it was like you. I realized this is not just some interesting thing. It is the most interesting thing in my life, and that hasn't changed, and that was 60 years ago, roughly. So, I'm still fascinated by it. I don't take psychedelics all the time anymore. I've been around beyond the chrysanthemum, as they say, enough times to know it, but I know how important this is in many, many ways as a catalyst for evolution of human consciousness and tools for understanding human consciousness. And it is just, it's big news, but it's been around so long that, it's been pushed out of the, it's been sort of diminished, but it remains important, in understanding who we are and so forth. So are you, of all the films that you've made, so many, are there two or three that you feel are your most important work, or is that a fair question?
is a little bit like asking me to pick my favorite child, because
Right.
all of them, even my film Bring Your Own Brigade, which I was came out during the pandemic, which is not a good time for a movie to come out, and it was about wildfires, so it was very harrowing to make, and it was very difficult to make, and I mean, there's nothing that wasn't a terrifically important step, and has given me just the gifts of my life, right? And has sort of the flowers just keep sort of blooming that from seeds that were planted during those productions. But I suppose in a way my films, Wasteland, about this collaboration, this art in this garbage dump, and the crash reel just as a kind of film, I think, and Mountain Queen, this new one. I mean, I think those ones, in a way, they've got the people in them are just really just light up the screen, and the stories in them really hold the audience. And so it's fun for me just watching an audience watch them, because just, you can't hear a pin drop, and there's moments in them where, I remember looking once at there's a biggest movie theater in Europe. It's in Berlin, and we were screening the Berlin Film Festival, and at one point I looked over in this moment in Wasteland, and in the light of the gigantic largest screen in Europe, in the faces of the largest audience in Europe or whatever, everyone's faces were just wet with tears, and it was reflecting. So I just saw this whole theater with these looking at this lovely Brazilian guy who's lived and worked in a garbage dump, picking stuff out of the garbage, so taking plastics and recycling them by hand, completely kind of outcast, determined to sort of, as an environmental steward, to sort of fight for environmental justice, and just this, so again, just this hidden hero. And his story is so moving that everyone in the audience is just, their faces are all shining, every single one of them. And I just think, wow, that is a moment. So those films kind of stick out, that sort of, and when you make a film like Mountain Queen, like, I didn't know what was going to happen when I began the movie. To be honest, it looked like a little bit of a long shot. That Lakpa's crazy dream of going back to Everest was even feasible. I mean, she's a 50-year-old woman in Connecticut,
Right.
and her daughters are just absolutely not in the mood, and the things that happen. And then, towards the end of the movie, I was filming, and I saw these couple of just precious moments where, like, you glimpse kind of the machinery of life working. And I saw these couple of moments where her daughters, just changed their, you could see them just change before your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And who's been very traumatized by what they've been through as a family, looks in the mirror, and she says, I see someone that could be somebody. And that is, you just seen her whole development, and you kind of capture these glimpses of how life sort of actually sort of works. And I'm just sort of fascinated by that kind of how does life actually operate, and how do you capture those moments that really are meaningful? Like, what are the significant moments in your life, that have led to you, the big forces that drive your life, the big moments where you just became captivated by something that turned into your life's path, and you can kind of glimpse these moments in the path where someone, goes this way, and then when they get knocked back, or when they make this decision to take this wild chance, and you don't know where it's going, but you want to sort of watch and find out, and the story goes on. And I think it's been incredible in my lifetime that we now have these cameras, and we now have this editing equipment, so that you don't need a script and you don't need actors
Right.
to make a good movie. You could actually kind of if we now have these sort of more affordable cameras, and we now have this really amazing editing systems that you can kind of really precisely tune a lot of material, and then find the story in it and build it up sort of like that. And I love that. I kind of love looking at life and sort of trying to think, well, how does it work, and what is the way to live, and what are the different stories? And I absolutely.
So I think maybe that's what distinguishes your approach, or maybe others have that approach. But you mentioned you have the cameras, you have the equipment, but no script, no. It's all spontaneous. You're basically documenting life as it unfolds, you know. And what I loved about many things I loved about Mountain Queen, but was the way that it interweaved this woman's adventures on Everest, her climbing and all that, with her family life, which was difficult, you know, and she had to overcome a lot of obstacles, and her daughters were not convinced, you know, and it was just, you know, she didn't get a lot of breaks, you know. It wasn't like people were making a path for her. She was just punching through, and nothing would stop her, and that was really incredible. You're kind of like that yourself, Lucy.
I don't know. Maybe that's why I like these films about inspiring people. Is I feel like
I know it can't. I mean, you can't have the production and the productivity that you've had without overcoming a lot of obstacles. So that's really admirable. You're a figure for other aspiring filmmakers, man or woman, to emulate, you know, because you're one of these people that just does it, you know. I don't care that it's hard, just hell with that. We're going to do it. And you did it. That's fantastic. It's been.
That's what same with you, isn't it? I feel like, isn't that with you? I feel like you take on the things that you think are the most important, no matter if they're hard or, you know, like take a lifetime, you know. But I feel like you're someone who's just devoted, you know, your intelligence and resources to really learning about the world in a really, really complete way, right? I feel like you've really, I mean, how do you describe what you do, may I ask? I mean, how do you describe how, big picture, your sort of...
Oh, I've gotten a lot of breaks in a certain sense. You know, in the breaks in the sense of meeting the right people at the right time that have been able to help me advance my career. For instance, different mentors that I've had in my graduate studies, these people show up. And, you know, I never had ambition to become a tenured professor or an academic, although most of my colleagues went that. I just pursued what was interesting, you know, and I let that be my continuing carrot, let that draw me along. And in the course of that, I did get academic, you know, I did get some academic standing. I never was a tenured professor, but I didn't really aspire to it. I had opportunities to study what I wanted to, lucky breaks, you know. For example, you know, I just as a trivial example, after I did my graduate work on ayahuasca, you know, which I published in 1984, then I got a letter from a guy at NIH, a scientist at NIH, and this was when you didn't send a text or anything. You actually got a postcard requesting a reprint. And I got this postcard from this neuroscientist at NIH in the Department of National Institute of Mental Health, actually, requesting my paper on ayahuasca. And I recognized his name because he had published a paper with another famous neuroscientist called Julius Axelrod on endogenous DMT and synthesis of DMT in the brain of rabbits or something. So I recognized this guy's name. I sent him a paper and I enclosed a letter. And I said, well, I'm interested in learning. I'm a botanist, basically, but I'm interested in learning science, learning neuroscience. Would you be have able to take me on as a postdoc, and he wrote back and he said, well, as a matter of fact, there is this program you can apply for, which is a pharmacology research associate traineeship, the Pratt Fellowship, for people who are outside of the field of neuroscience but want to get into it. Apply for this program and I'll make sure that you do, or I'll try to get you into it. He didn't promise, but he said this would be a good program. So I applied for that and I got it. And I ended up going to NIMH for 2 years, which was really amazing. And that was my detour into neuroscience. And that whole long-winded narrative is just an example of a lucky break. I got a lucky break, and I didn't really. And as it turned out, later I learned that this gentleman who had invited me had actually been on an expedition to the Amazon with Neil Towers, Dr. Neil Towers, who was my supervisor at UBC, the famous or infamous RV Alpha Helix expedition to the Amazon in 1979. So Neil may have, nudged things along a little bit or sent this guy a note and said he was my student. But anyway, I ended up there, and that was just one of those things. I've had breaks like that. I've been very lucky in that respect. So, and I feel like I haven't really worked that hard for it. It's just, I've had breaks, unlike somebody like Lakpa who had to make her own, and you yourself, you're very much a person that sees a path, and if there's a path, you go down it, and if there isn't a path, you get your machete out and you make a path.
Not always. It can be tricky, but I will say, when Lakpa, she's so smart and so curious about the world, but she wasn't allowed to go to school. And my luck, I look back so much, about the luck I had, that not only was I smart, but my dad sort of believed in educating girls, and he'd been on a scholarship at a good school himself, but he'd never been to college. Nobody in my family had been to college before. So it wasn't like I came from this fabulously educated family, not at all. But my dad really was supportive, and I sort of was really fascinated by what I was learning at school, was able to get scholarship and kind of keep sort of jumping around to better and better schools. So I wound up at arguably the best high school in the UK. I then went to Oxford, which was free completely, where I studied without worrying about what I was going to do later, just in terms of what I was interested in. It was all free at that time. In fact, the government gave you a living stipend. And then I was able to get a Fulbright scholarship to go to NYU for film school. And I was just last week, I think, NYU Film School was sort of rated #1 film school. And Oxford, which is where I studied for my BA, MFA, BA, MA, and then I went to NYU for my MFA. But Oxford was, for the 9th year running, rated #1 university in the world or something like that. And I thought, what a privilege, because I had amazing teachers and amazing fellow students. And that was, for me, the training and opportunity I had that, say, Lakpa, who wasn't allowed to go to elementary school. She didn't learn. She had to carry a little brother to school. I mean, the privilege of my life that I got to exercise these fascinations. And exactly like you, if I had to say one thing about my whole life's journey, it's just I've been able to sort of freely pursue or be sort of paid to eke out a living just pursuing what I'm interested in.
Right.
There's nothing I find more interesting than learning about psychedelics. But for me, that's something that I've been able to turn into my profession, And so that kind of what do you say? I'm going to quote you on that. The continuing carrot of just pursuing what I find the most. And I think that's, if in a way,
or comes up that you're interested in. Yeah.
secret, isn't it? I always think the secret to doing our best work is to be intrinsically motivated. There's no amount of money or like
Right. Right.
parents that are quite as will get your brain naturally whirring away at something in a way that actually lets it solve and do good work. I think nothing will get your brain like whirring away in the shower or wherever you go, like, and keeping on just like keeping on turning things over in your mind and finding new creative approaches to doing some work that you think is valuable. Like nothing will do that as much as being intrinsically just fascinated and passionately curious.
Right.
Absolutely the gas in my tank, I think.
Curiosity is what drives discovery. I mean, very much so in a person's life and in science and in all human endeavors that are worthwhile. It's the curiosity that drives.
Yeah. And I love as well, there's a great, I think it's in a poem, what's that great Patterson, William Carlos Williams poem? There's something like a line says, a dissonance in the valence of uranium led to the discovery. Dissonance, if you're interested, leads to discovery. And this idea in there that it's sort of like this sort of, wait, that's weird kind of thing often drives a sort of discovery, like Howard Lotsof thinking like, wait, why am I not craving heroin after not having mix for like 24 hours? Like, wait, what? And that sort of, and then I think, I don't know if that rings true of any of your work, but sort of, what is this ayahuasca stuff? What are these things? Wait, that is really important. That experience I just had drinking ayahuasca or whatever, you tell me for you, the first time I experienced a flood dose of Ibogaine, I just thought, what is this most fascinating experience? Like, I just have to like learn everything I possibly can about this, because I've never experienced anything that seems more important, that just surprises me, because it just shouldn't be like this, and that kind of dissonant thing. Does that ring true of any of your discoveries?
Yeah, it is. Well, two things. It's the curiosity that drives it, the accidental discoveries that are unexpected, and all through all that, it's been the mentors. I think mentorship has been very important, and probably for you as well. The colleagues that you have met, the people you've been able to work with that are inspiring and that encourage you. If it hadn't been for, I've worked for all sorts of, as a student and graduate student, I worked for, all sorts of different research supervisors. And so some of them were real jerks, but they were still inspiring in some ways. I mean, I was working with them. As human beings, they sometimes weren't so hot, but they were good scientists. Others were both excellent human beings and good scientists. Those are the ones that I treasure the most. I treasure my master's degree supervisor, Sandy Siegel at Hawaii and University of Hawaii, and Neil Towers at UBC. These were my master's and PhD supervisors. And they were fantastic people and wonderful scientists. So they were really inspirational for me. Well, Lucy, we've had a wonderful conversation. Is there anything we didn't say that we should? We're about somewhat over an hour here.
No, I mean, I think the only thing I could possibly add would be the biggest thank you, because your work is such a light, and is just, I sort of pinched myself, and I am such a, I must be doing something right if I'm sitting here chatting to you. It really is lights me up that we get to meet and talk. And I'm so aware of all the beautiful, energy that you bring to all the work and community that you hold. And it's just a great gift in my life that I've come up with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being part of it. And Well, you're in the middle of your career. I'm toward the end of my career, but I look forward to exploring the work you've done now that I'm aware of it. And I'm looking forward to whatever you bring out of the hopper in the future. It's going to be amazing. So anything I can do to just make people aware of it, I'm here for you. I want people need to know about you and your work. So maybe this podcast will be a small part of that. So,
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Thank you again.
all right. Good luck with your award ceremony, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Yes. Great, great, great. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.